good to see everyone. Some new faces, some old faces. This is a very nice format, that we've developed to come together in practice, study, and community. Once a month with these two related sister communities sharing time together. So I'm really excited about moving forward with a practice of everyday life koans, both in the One Body Sangha and in Eon Zen. So in this talk, I want to say a little bit about what koans are, and most of you know what koans are, but so for those of you who have been studying for a while and kind of know what koans are, actually I'm going to bring in some information that you probably aren't even aware of. I didn't learn in my own tradition actually I'd been studying for years about koans, and before Shishin Roshi kind of shared this kind of framework with me. So there'll be something for everybody in this talk. But I'll talk about what koans are, how we work with them, and then how to work with everyday life situations as koans. And that'll be a practice that I want both communities to really lean into over the next few months. It's very powerful. Okay. So what are koans? Okay, most of you know, but I'll give you my description. It's a practice of bringing meditative mind to the deepest questions and challenges of our life. A practice of bringing meditative mind to the deepest questions and challenges of our life. And this, in my experience, is very unique to Zen. There's a lot of spiritual traditions that, from a mystical standpoint, are seeking union with the divine. And we certainly have that in Zen. And there's certain kind of contemplative traditions that will give us sort of information and guidance on living our life and meeting the challenges of our life. But most of them, many of them, have to do with understanding a certain level of values, a certain kind of, these are maybe the wise best practices of living right and exercising skillful means in a certain way. And these are all very deep teachings, and Buddhism and Zen have this aspect as well, this kind of teaching. But koan is different. Koan is, we actually take a plunge into the difficult, challenging situation or the deep question that we have, and we allow it to work on us in a way that can yield a very big shift in our own understanding of ourselves and our own understanding of our own experience of the issue and the challenging situation. So it can really break open our potency and our personhood into what actually is alive in the situation. So it's not mental at all. It isn't conceptual at all. It's experiential. It's using the challenging situation as a doorway into a greater depth of identification and a greater aliveness within your life. Some of you may have heard the three kind of modes that we bring to our Zen practice. Faith, doubt, and determination are the words that are normally used. And they have different kind of emotional qualities to them, different kind of things we're paying attention to, deployment of our attention in these different modes, you could say. Faith is the acceptance of what is, complete acceptance of what is, and to be fully engaged and participating in what is. Recognizing where our own blockages are coming in, the things that are causing resistance to being with what is, and then moving through those. Okay. The doubt side is a little bit different because it actually brings the particular question or challenge directly as the foreground, you could say, of our meditative mind. And we apply that meditative mind to that specific doubt that we have. So there's a question. The doubt mode is not self-doubt. It isn't that, oh, I'm not good enough. What's going on here? Everything is going into the crapper. That kind of doubting mind. It's the mind of curiosity. It's the mind of questioning. What is going on here? Who am I? Okay, it's that kind of doubt. Who am I? Questioning. And this is the great doubt is the motivating force, for our practice. It's the engine. It's the fuel. So the core questions of who am I? What is life? What is death? And what we call the great matter in Zen. This is, we bring that up as the right immediate charge or question in our practice. Okay. So koans typically present a difficult situation or edge. I said the deepest questions or challenges of our life, or you could say they manifest in difficult situations or edges as we look to what are the koans within our life. I'll take a little sideways step and just talk about the traditional koan curriculum, right? So koans evolved in the Rinzai Zen tradition primarily over centuries, and they started as exchanges, spontaneous exchanges, usually between teachers and students, monks and teachers, sometimes between two monks, sometimes between two teachers, sometimes within communities. And the particular way in which the dialogue or the exchange manifested, oftentimes within the event itself, when it happened, people had profound insights. A monk would have a big breakthrough experience, or a teacher would give a big teaching. Sometimes it was received and sometimes it wasn't received. But they're very concentrated, very crystallized exchanges between people that the tradition came to see, that when we can meditate on the way certain situations were responded to, and we take that in and embody it and we make it our own, that they can be transformative for us too. So there's actually 5 types of koans, and this is the part that a lot of my students here might not even know this part of it. So this may be interesting to you, but there's 5 categories of koans in the formal Rinzai curriculum. There's Hoshin koans, which are awakening koans. So that's the core root koans, such as Mu, or what is the sound of one hand. Those are the 2 main primary root koans we have. The next type are called Kikan koans, or checking koans. They're development koans. So they check whether certain insight around true nature is very flexible and adaptive and applies to all situations, because there's all situations that we find ourselves in our life, and maybe when we're just sitting on the cushion we can experience ourself as no self and the universe, but then as soon as we're presented with, say, interaction with somebody who charges us, that goes out the window and we contract back into our limited identity. Okay, so there's a lot of checking koans, and most of the koans in the early collections that we use, including the Mumonkan, fall into this category, the checking koans. The third category is called gonsen, or word phrase koans, and these have to do with the use of words. They check our ability to communicate realization clearly and not to be bound by conceptual formulations. So comes a time sometimes in a koan student's path where they've really had success with coming into Dokusan and presenting their koan by just being quiet, perhaps. And they're just going to be, oh, it's just here, we don't have to say anything, we don't have to do anything. Nope, that's not this koan, you got to say something here. So I'll ring them out and they'll come back until I can see them expressing in a live way. Now, if it's a certain type of koan and you're using words, sometimes that's appropriate and sometimes it isn't. So it's the beauty of koans, is there's no set, response to it. Okay. The fourth category is what's called kato koans, or entangling vines koans. And these are subtle disentanglings of subtle conceptual layers or beliefs that we have. The fifth type is what are called nanto koans. And those of you doing koan practice are familiar with nanto koans. And we have a series of these. There's about, 8 to 10 in the course of the 700 koans we do, 750 koans we do in our curriculum, that are these nanto koans, which really get to the root of our self-identification. And these nanto translates as hard to pass koan. So in my practice, I spent on some nanto koans, I spent, 6 to 8 months just on a single koan like that. And then there's actually, then we also work with thematic koans, the 5 ranks, which are the relationship between the relative and the absolute, we work with as koans. And then we also work with the precepts as koans. Okay. So that's of perhaps some interest of some of you. But what I think is helpful for everybody here is to recognize that there's these different flavors of koans. They come in all different suits and sizes. Okay, and they're all related to helping us understand and work with these deep challenges and questions. So where do our deep challenges and questions typically come from? This kind of emerged in our Dharma sharing a couple of weeks ago, that the our deepest challenges tend to come from a gap between our subjective experience, which includes our desires and attachments, that subjective experience, and then reality, how the world is. So the response to that gap, if there is a gap, okay, and there usually is a gap, manifesting in many different ways, is the koan itself. Okay, this edge between my experience and how I want the world to be and how the world actually is. So how is the world? What is the world? Well, according to Buddhism, the seals of Buddhism say that the nature of this reality is actually defined by impermanence, or emptiness, you could say, no self, and then attachment and the release of attachment. Okay, those are the 3 seals of Buddhism. Okay, so we could say things have no fixed nature and are always changing. That's the impermanence, emptiness seal. The self does not exist as a fixed or permanent entity. So it's kind of a version of impermanence and emptiness applied to the subjective experience. Okay. And then the third one is dukkha and nirvana. Those are combined. Dukkha being suffering caused by attachment. So it's our experience of attachment. And then the possibility of relief from the suffering caused by attachment by releasing those attachments or healing those attachments. So you could say that third seal is about our relationship to the first 2 seals. If we're really attached to our subjective, we're attached to things, but things pass and they move and they're not the way we want them to be, we suffer. If we can experience them directly, we don't suffer. Okay. If we're attached to a certain identity, a certain idea of ourselves, we suffer. If we can actually see ourselves as not being fixed, no self is true self, then we don't suffer. Okay. So the koans come in when we find ourselves resisting reality. Okay, fighting reality. All right. So the traditional koan, I think I mentioned, the koans evolved over many centuries, actually, um, of primarily monastic practice, of Zen practice in China, and then also in Japan. Our formal koans come from both the Chinese tradition and the Japanese tradition. Um, and these exchanges happened, and then they were recorded, or they were remembered and written down years later. But then the koans were actually refined. What's the essence of what happened here? Maybe they didn't happen exactly the way the koan presents, but the koan presents the heart of the question and the heart of the matter. And then there's a long tradition of commentary around the koans to bring out different aspects of the tradition. So where we are, we're in a very interesting place in American Buddhism and American Zen. We're just in the first few decades of adapting the Zen tradition and Buddhism as a whole into a very different culture than we've inherited it from, which is the Japanese and the Chinese cultures. So the koans from the curriculum have to do with monastic life. Okay, there's very few koans that have to do with work environments, relationships, loving relationships, family, money, these things that are intrinsic parts of everyday life. What they did have to do with the deep questions about, who am I? Using words, manifesting emptiness, but in a certain context, which did not include family, relationship, work, and these aspects of modern life. We have to have that be the material of our Zen practice. That's our life. That's our experience now in our modern life. So we are in the early stages of really identifying koans that apply in these areas. And there's been some really good, at least one really good collection put together by teachers in my lineage. I want to share. Let's see. Okay, it's called The Book of Householder Koans by Eve Mionin Marco and Wendy Agyoku Nakao, both Roshis in our lineage. I'm very familiar with both of the Roshis. I lived underneath Agyoku, now Roshi, when I was a resident at ZCLA back in the early 90s, and I know them well. And they put this book together, maybe it's 10 years ago now. And they worked with students from all over the world, actually. They say four countries are represented in this collection, with very modern situations that came up. In fact, the book has categories of home, raising children, work, loss, illness, old age, and death, and then many gates of practice. And they have about 10 to 15 everyday koans in each one. So I'm going to recommend this book for everybody, and we'll be working with it, perhaps in the One Body, perhaps in Eon Zen. I'll be developing maybe some forums to do this type of work. Okay. So, all right. So I'll say a little bit more about how to kind of identify a koan, and then how to work with it. And then I'm going to invite Gakyo and Sokyo to share some life koans that they worked with previously in their life. So again, the sign of a koan is that you've got a charge around a challenging situation, and you might recognize there's this gap between your subjective experience and the world as it is. Okay, so it can manifest in forms like, what do I do in this situation, and that can be taking a job, or what do I say to this person that I appear to have a conflict with, or how do I deal with this situation with my child who is misbehaving? I mean, there's so many of them, right? Every day we come up against these situations that challenge us. And our normal approach is to, usually we have some sort of strong reaction to it, depending on our ability to be with conflict and to be with strong emotions and to be with anger and to be with confusion. We may have a very strong reaction just to those conditions, right? And then typically our mind will go towards, well, how do I fix this? How do I fix this? How do I change this? Okay, we want to change the situation on the outside because our internal experience is not feeling good. Okay? We're charged. Okay, we don't want to be in the unknown. We don't want to be powerless. We don't want to be helpless. We don't want to be feel rejected. All of these strong emotions. So we want to change that by changing the outside world. With the koan, we want to plunge into the internal feeling and then see how to meet the external situation from a full embodiment of the internal situation, the unpleasant, the charged, the difficult, the challenging internal situation that we have. So we go into the question not from, oh, well, I'm going to figure this out up here, which is what we tend to do. And we go right into the felt sense of the question itself, and we have the response to the situation come from that place. Okay. So first, we want to, when we're having a charged situation, we want to identify kind of what the koan is in this situation. So the first thing you represent, okay, what is this challenging question that I might have, or this situation I might have? And it can be, it can be very deep. It can be, well, who am I? That's the core root koan. Okay, so it can be of varying levels of intensity, you could say, but you recognize you have this question. Okay, the next step is to find what the question is, if you can put it into words. Okay. So, and this can take some discernment, is to feel into, well, what's going on here with me? What really is at the heart of the matter? And how would I express that as a question or a koan? and then you work with that with meditative mind. Okay. And then we embody it and we see that emerges. So I'm going to pass it off to Gakyo and Sokyo. I don't know who would like to go first. And you can share your working with one of these in your life.
I'll dive in. Thank you for that intro, Sensei. The koan I'll share is from about 13 years ago now, and it's a work-life koan that was a really big one for me. I was thinking about the different types of koans, and there's actually two layers to it. And the first one, I think, was somewhat of a Nanto koan for me, now that I think about it. Excuse me. I had in my work life, I had in my previous experience prior to this working with this koan, I had often ended up really out of balance in my work. There was a lot of identification of perfectionism, wanting to do everything well, meeting everybody's needs, and really high performing work that I had done as a university professor and architect and all kinds of things. And architects are notoriously workaholics, and the university system is also notoriously out of balance in terms of work expectations and high performance. And I had struggled with that a lot, such to the point that I actually had gone to a treatment program for workaholism and really trying to get at the root of what's underneath that for me. And I had entered a path of recovery for that in 2012. And I'd taken a leave of absence from the work I was doing here in Boulder at the time with a young adult mental health program. And after that first year, I was asked by the CEO of that program, a private program, was working with the university to initiate a collegiate recovery support program on campus. And he knew I had a background in higher ed, and so asked me if I would be interested in working with him to help establish this program and be the program manager. And I'm not even, I mean, I think I'm maybe 9, 10 months out of treatment for workaholism at this point and in early recovery. And I was really afraid, of whether I could do that. It's a pretty high performing, job, establishing a new program, working on campus. And I felt very scared of whether or not I could do it and stay healthy. I didn't know yet how to do that. And so I took some time with it and I really did sit with this. It's interesting, it was well before I was working on koan practice, and I think it was even before I was with Eon Zen, but I had a sitting practice, I had a meditation practice. And I remember sitting with this because it felt like such a dilemma. It was like either I just totally say no because I don't know if I'm ready to do this, or I didn't know that I could do it and be okay. So it felt like this real dilemma, something I wanted to do, but I didn't know that I could do it. And I felt very afraid of saying yes, but saying no felt like, well, I don't know if I can do any kind of work then. What am I going to do? And am I going to be able to take care of this in a way that is successful, but will not necessarily abandon myself, right? And so I sat with it in my meditation practice for a good couple of months. And it kept, I think I was very much up in the figured out mind still, like, should I, shouldn't I? And that's one of my clues in koan practice I've learned is that if I'm trying to find an answer and the answer isn't coming, it's likely because I'm trying to find an answer. I'm trying to figure it out. And I couldn't. There was no clear yes or no. And so I just let go of that and just sat with it. And what came at a certain point, as I was so caught in this, can I do this? Am I going to be okay? This like voice came out of my wherever these voices come from. And it said, it's not about you. It's not about you. And I just felt like a gong going off. It was just so clear that I was really caught in this setup between like me and the work and whether I could do the work. And so that was the first layer that I saw, oh, it's not about me. So in a way, kind of in the three seals of existence, sort of realizing no self, opening into this oneness that, oh, this is to serve all beings, right? So that was a big Nanto koan for me to just let go of it, having it to be about me and whether I was going to be able to make it successful and whether I was going to be okay. But then came the next layer of, well, so then what is this about? If I say yes to this, what is the deeper koan? And I realized for me, what I had been dancing around was, how do I serve all beings and not abandon this being? How do I include all beings, myself included? And I get chills even now thinking about this. How do I serve all beings and not abandon this being? And it was a really long practice of learning how to do that. And for me, as I got more intimate with that, it was really like, oh, how do I show up with whatever's happening, with whatever I've been called to do, um, and respond without having all of my attachments of success, failure, perfect, imperfect, um, me, them, right? So when we've been preparing for this, working with everyday life koans, one of the things I came across is how koans help us see what we're attached to. So that in that, how do I serve all beings without abandoning this? My attachments are the things that get in the way. When I start to attach to good, bad, perfect, imperfect, um, then suddenly I'm starting to either abandon myself or control them, and neither of them goes well. So letting go of those over time, and wasn't able to do it right away. It was a process of learning. how do I just be intimate with what is and serve it as best as I'm able with the ingredients of my life and the life of everyone else that is available. And once I saw that, then like, oh, I saw that there were people that I could call upon for help. I saw that I could be gentler with how we went about things. We didn't have to do everything at once. We could start this program from a place of real humility. I don't know what this program is going to look like. I don't know what success looks like. Let's figure it out together. And it became this really very deep in the heart experience of collaboration and connection and community where all of us were creating it together. It wasn't me creating it, right? So that was my practice with that koan and continues to this day. Yeah. Gakyo, your turn.
Uh, I think in some ways it's related. Just a little history of my. It's also professional life, um, and I started in human services work pretty close to within months of discovering Zazen and Zen training. So I did have good assistance from a Zen teacher all along about how to bring my life into my practice. I had been teaching art at a school for kids with autism. It was a program where kids from all over the states whose disability was so profound that their entire school district claimed they were not able to meet their needs. So it was a residential school for kids as young as 6 and as old as 17 with very severe level of autism. And it was a very messy, chaotic, intense environment. These were people that, for the most part, out of 75 of them, maybe 3 were verbal at all, but not necessarily in a meaningful, functional way. They might repeat TV commercials or something. So they weren't able to communicate a lot. It was a building full of students and staff that were always maxed out with frustration, whether it's that the students weren't able to toilet themselves, might have needed help with eating, um, sensitivities, sensory sensitivities with the students where they couldn't take the fluorescent lights, the feeling of their clothes. They couldn't take sounds around them, so they would make enough sound to drown out all the other sound. And if you put 70 something people together doing that, um, it was a kind of psychically, emotionally, mentally exhausting and overwhelming environment to be in. And at the very beginning, um, you just feel it and absorb it. And I would just start finding really odd ways to kind of decompress and level myself off after work. And sometimes it was taking an extra half-hour drive along the river before going home. Sometimes it was going into a yarn store or office supply store where everything was quiet and organized and arranged in color orders. Um, the next work after that was managing day treatment programs for adults with cognitive disabilities. Um, Again, just loud, chaotic emergencies all the time. Always dialed up to 11 to be able to be there and meet whatever I saw the needs were. Shifted from that to hospice work as a therapist, working in psychiatric hospitals, uh, and also residential programs and day programs for people with severe mental illness, mainly schizophrenia, but also mood disorders. And I always got very attached to the people that I worked with. They meant a lot to me. I loved being with them. And it was really hard to be with them at the same time. and really hard to come home and find a way to be at rest at all, because I was always concerned, because these weren't just jobs that I wanted to do well. These were human beings that I was of service to. And whether it was because they were at the end of their life, because they were in a psychiatric crisis, or their day-to-day life had always just been very, very challenging in other ways. I absorbed a lot of it. I exchanged with them a lot. And any amount that I pulled back was really challenging because, well, I don't have any kind of, I have probably the opposite of any kind of workaholism. The idea that I was intending to be of service, and this tied in with Buddhism and Zen for me, and this idea of what I thought my bodhisattva path had to look like, and was anything that wasn't for the benefit of others felt really selfish or self-involved for me, and that there was a lot of judgment that came with that. So the question for me became not about this separate self in a personal life that differed from the self in my capacity as a therapist, as a Red Cross disaster mental health worker, as a teacher. But the issue seemed to be in trying to divide those identities for them both to be okay. So the question for me became, who is it that is of service? And this ideal I have of how a bodhisattva functions, or how a good Zen student functions, and the person that just wants to lay down on her back with her legs up the wall and headphones on and listen to music. And that they're not different people. And the who is it that is of service had to be my whole self I was bringing with me to offer to my clients. But it also had to be the person who is of service, had to be who's going to take care of me, and it can't be some idea of somebody separate that's going to walk in the door and say, I have dinner made for you. So who is of service became the core question for me. And any time there's some hint of this separate self that needs something outside of myself, it's what brings me home into that this is all just one, and that's all. And the rest was a dream that might have made things more tangled. So who is of service was mine.
Very good. Yeah, thank you both for those sharings. Those are very, very good examples here. So we had two other parts we wanted to get through before the bottom of the hour. We're going to do breakout rooms for people to express and find what might be a koan alive for them in their life, or perhaps there is one that has happened in your life and you have clarity around how you worked with that. And then we wanted to come back and we wanted to have some sharing. So Sokyo and Gakyo, I'll defer to you on how you want to do it.